The story begins many years after the first season. Gungho has now become a professional boxer and Woo Jin is his coach. His mother, for her part, opened her own cafe and both of them help her when they have free time. Soon, Gungho will have a fight for the World Middleweight Championship. His rival came to the country just to face him, but a dangerous group of criminals also arrived with him. Apparently, the champion borrowed a lot of money and had to win that fight at any cost to pay off his debt. At first, it's very hard for Woo-won, but then he uses the technique he learned from Woo Jin. That's how he manages to defeat him. The former champion admits his defeat and tells him that he lost fair and square. Gungho celebrates with his family with lots of meat and homemade food. The heir of the Lim group is also part of his family, so he goes with the guys to celebrate. They thank him for all his help. He congratulates them, and they start drinking because they not only have to celebrate their title, but also the approval of the hospital in honor of Mr. Choi, which will obviously bear his name. Everyone is very happy about that, and they can't imagine what's coming. At the same time, the former champion is taken to an underground fight. Since he lost, he couldn't pay his debt, so he has to fight to pay the money he still owes. Also, if he wins, they promise him an extra bonus. When he sees that his opponent is the mobster, Gung thinks it will be easy to beat him. But that crime boss was a very skilled boxer who doesn't fight fair. That's how he manages to beat him. He always hits him in the joints. He was also a sadist. Whenever he won, he would ask for the cameras to be turned off so he could finish off his opponents. When he finishes, he says that the money he won isn't enough, so he orders them to bring Gungho. The next day, we see that the hacker cop was still alive. She was slowly recovering from the hit and run she suffered. In the first season, the kids would often go to help her and bring her food to cheer her up. She felt bad because she thought she was a burden to them. But Woo Jin tells her that's not true, that she's part of their family, and family supports each other in difficult times. At night, the gangsters go to visit Gungho's mother. With tricks, they manage to get into her house and wait for the kids patiently. When they arrive, both of them become alert because the men seem very dangerous. The gangsters tell them not to be afraid and that they just want to talk business. The boss tells them that he runs a boxing league called IKFC that has 4 million subscribers. Gungho tells him that he has never heard of it and that it's probably not legal. The criminal tells him that he's right, and that precisely for that reason, they'll pay him much more money than a conventional league. They promise to pay him 10 billion won for a single fight and another 5 billion if he wins. Woo Jin tells them that he's not interested in anything illegal because easy money comes at a high price. The criminal tells him he's a fool and warns him that he always gets what he wants one way or another. Because of this, the guys decide to call their trusted informant to find out who they're up against. But the criminal wasn't on the list, although the informant managed to discover that IKFC is a very popular underground fighting platform abroad. Because of this, the guys want to solve the whole problem on their own so they don't put anyone else in danger. But these criminals were international. They had more money and better men than the villain from the first season. However, to strengthen their forces, they suggest releasing the gorilla named Beon, who was locked up and held a grudge against the guys. At night, the criminals hire a special group that will be in charge of kidnapping Gungho's mother. But when they try to take her away, they make noise and he notices, quickly coming out to fight them. But these guys weren't ordinary fighters. They were much stronger and more skilled. The boys face them and have a hard time rescuing their mother. Luckily, in the end, our two heroes manage to defeat them. As they escape, Gungho tries to follow them, but before he can reach them, the van explodes. Apparently, the criminals were very meticulous. If something went wrong, they eliminated all loose ends. The next day, the police question the boys. They tell them everything they know. He tells them that this case may take some time, so they should go somewhere else. For his part, the detective discovers that those who tried to kidnap Gungho's mother were former special agents. So they were more prepared than a regular officer. Then the boys take their mother to the hacker's house to keep her safe. But the criminals were watching them very closely. At the same time, Beom takes a pill and suddenly has a seizure. So they take him. But on the way, the criminals had infiltrated, and that's how they managed to take him away. For her part, the hacker decides to look for the IKFC. That's how she discovers it was something very big on the dark web. But they had to enter a card to access their website. No one wanted to give their information to criminals. So they suggest using a fake card. For that, they go to the boss who was still working in the underworld. And he had hundreds of fake cards. He wanted to help them because he felt like an older brother to them. At the same time, Biom wakes up. Now he's bigger and stronger. That's why the criminals who freed him didn't stand a chance against him. But when he faces the boss, he realizes that he was too strong for him. Even so, he manages to land a hit. The boss tells him that he's very strong, but he would be even stronger if someone had taught him how to fight. Back with Wu Jin, his superior tells him that they're being followed. So he must tell Wung Wo to take his mother to a safe place. Meanwhile, they will distract the criminals by leading them to another part of the city. Wung Wo takes his mother and the hacker out, and he takes them to his friend Rico. Then he takes his motorcycle and quickly goes to help them. Meanwhile, the mobsters have already realized what they were planning. So they wanted to kidnap Wu Jin. He had no idea, and that's why he fell into their trap. But when Rollin took him out, there was only one of the criminals. But when they tried to stop him, they realized that he was very good at fighting. He wasn't a normal fighter. He also pulls out a very strange knife. That's why, even though there were two of them, they could barely defeat him. When they try to take him away, the other criminals arrive, and our heroes have to run away. The superior knows that they want Wu Jin, so he asks him to run because he'll try to stop them. Even though Wu Jin tries to escape, there were too many thugs. In the end, they managed to catch them. And just when they were being taken away, Wung Wo appears. He puts on his special gloves to beat up bandits. And that's how he takes down each one of them. Then, he takes his friends to the hospital. Wung Wo felt guilty because if he had fought the criminal, none of this would be happening. His mother tells him not to say that. He knows that if any of his friends were in a similar situation, he would have done the same for them. Then we see that Wu Jin's cut wasn't that deep. His hand would heal soon. He just needs to take care of himself. Then Detective Lee calls them and tells him that the hacker informed him about what's going on. Now he will help too. So he tells everything to his cousin, and the two of them decide to help Wung Wo. But when they meet the boss, they don't want to work with him because he's a loan shark and moves in the underworld. Wung Wo tells them that he trusts him because he's part of his family. Without his help, they couldn't have defeated the first season's villain. The detective says that's fine, but he warns him not to commit crimes in front of him. Then things get worse because they find out that Bei-on had escaped. Now we see that the villain had tamed him. He tells him that he now works for him. Besides paying him, he will give him the chance to take revenge on Wu Jin and Wung Wo. Because of all this, Min Bei-on is very nervous. He thinks that the mobster from the first season could also escape. Now we see that the new villain was much more ruthless. He was a real savage. And he also killed people without showing any emotion. The superior, for his part, knew that it was more efficient to search using his contacts. Because in the underworld, money and connections are everything. That's how he manages to identify the criminal's car. Later, we find out why they wanted Wung Wo. The IKFC fight page had been dropping in views, and as a result, they were losing money. So they needed to attract new subscribers? That's why they wanted Wung Wo, the world middleweight champion, so that Koreans and other Asians would subscribe and watch his fights. Then we see that the criminal's hacker planted a virus on the boys' PC. That's why their laptop doesn't work anymore. If they open it again, they'll know where they are and track all their movements. The next day, Wu Jin and the supervisor go to look for one of the guys who attacked them. They find out that they trained at a gym. But when they get there, it's full of thugs. That's why the three of them have to fight. But since they were making a lot of noise, the neighbors called the police. After fighting for a few minutes, the police arrive and arrest them all. Then Wung Wo and Detective Lee were going to meet with the detective in charge of their case. But suddenly, a stranger stabs the detective. Wung Wo chases him. But the guy was very agile. Although Wung Wo was fast, the guy knew parkour. And that's how he manages to escape. Not without laughing in his face first. Then they call Detective Lee to help Wu Jin and his friends. When they see that they're being released, the criminals complain to the police. But the detective tells them that if their faces are made public, then their families and everyone who knows them will be affected. The criminals know he's right, so they lower their heads and remain silent. Detective Lee was furious because his superior ruined his plans. But he begs for a second chance, and he tells him that he acted in good faith. And all he wants is to help the kids so he doesn't feel so bad about himself. The detective accepts his apology, and he orders him to capture one of the criminals who would be released at night. At night, the superior arrives at a massage parlor. He catches the chubby guy off guard, handcuffs him, and threatens that if he doesn't talk, he'll wear diapers for life. When he feels the stick, the criminal decides to confess everything he knows. But what he knew wasn't much, nor was it very helpful. Then we see that the criminals found Min Byung's assistant. They kidnapped his sister, and they told him he has to turn in his boss. Seeing his sister suffer, he has no choice but to tell everything he knows. The next day, a girl arrives at the bar that Min Byung used to frequent. She goes straight to the bartender and kisses him. Then he collapses because she had given him a drug. Under its effects, he tells the girl everything. Later, when the heir arrives, the girl greets him. He doesn't suspect anything. But after the first drink, he starts to hallucinate. The girl laughs because the drug was really powerful, and it shouldn't be mixed with alcohol. The next day, Min Byung is hospitalized in serious condition. The drug was so potent that his nervous system collapsed, and his liver was destroyed. To help him, the doctors needed a sample of what he had taken. That's why Detective Lee asks her for help. They go to the bar and discover that the girl used truth serum. This rules out the bartender as a suspect. So now they go after the secretary, but they ask the superior and Gungho to look for the girl. But before they set out, the villain calls him. He threatens him to accept a fight with him, otherwise he'll hurt his coach, and then his mother, and so on with everyone he cares about. Gungho was furious. The villain tells him he'd better accept, because if he's against him, he'll be against anyone who needs money, since everyone has a price. And he has a lot of money. Gungho didn't know what to do, but his superior tells him to calm down, that he must harden his heart so he can turn his fists into a weapon. If he lets himself be carried away by his emotions, more people could get hurt. Then the two of them go to a gay bar since the host was a very sociable person, and he knew a lot of people in the underworld. He doesn't recognize the girl, but he knows who's selling the truth serum. The superior promises to lower the interest on his debt if he helps him get in touch. The guy agrees and calls his contact. To his surprise, he was a fan of Gungho, so he helps without asking for anything in return. He also knew the girl and knew where to find her. At the same time, Detective Lee confronts the secretary. He thought she had sold Min Byung out for money, but her sister tells him that's not the case, that they threatened to take her life, and because of that, she had no choice but to betray him. When they find out about this, they promise to protect them if they tell them everything they know. The secretary describes the three individuals. He also confesses that they were a very good team and didn't talk unnecessarily. Detective Lee realizes that they are professionals. They were probably former police officers. That's why they need to step up their game. And they also need to act as a team. That's why they call in a special agent. He graduated at the top of his class. After greeting each other, they start the meeting. Apparently, they had already identified one of them. He was a former soldier. He specialized in explosives. He also had a daughter who lived with her mother. So they had to go after him, since he was the only one they had information on. Given the seriousness of the matter, Detective Lee says that no one else besides them can know about their movements, since they don't know how many police officers the criminals have bought. After the meeting, they split into teams. Meanwhile, Min Byung is struggling to recover. Even though the drug destroyed his body, he wanted to recover on his own to become stronger. Woo Jin and Detective Lee. They go to the criminal's daughter's house. Her mother knew that her son was doing illegal things. That's why she tells them everything she knows. She tells him that his wife had pancreatic cancer. That's why he borrowed a lot of money. But with his salary, he couldn't pay off his debt. So he was discharged and had to look for another job. Besides, his wife died. So he only focuses on making money to support his family. Detective Lee asks her to please help them. That way, his son would get better treatment, and he could spend more time with his family. Later, Min Byung calls the detective. He says he's feeling better now, but he needs a few days to be able to help them. At night, Woo and his superior get the location of the girl who drugged Min Byung, so they decide to catch her. When they arrive at her workplace, it turns out she was a waitress in a poker club full of dangerous criminals. When the girl realizes she was being followed, she screams that they are police officers, and all the thugs pull out their knives. That's how a massive fight breaks out. The girl tries to escape, Wu tries to go after her, but there were too many thugs. In the end, the two Marines managed to take them all down, but the girl had already escaped. Luckily, Wu Jin was waiting for her and manages to capture her without much trouble. Then they take her phone and the hacker checks all her messages. That's how they find out that the crime boss was staying at a luxury hotel. The hacker calls the receptionist and asks about him. She says he's in the penthouse. The detective decides to send a special team to catch him. But the receptionist warns the criminals and now they know they're coming. This gives them time to escape and they leave a surprise for the police. When the special team arrives, it was too late. The criminals had left a bomb and the whole floor explodes with them inside. Detective Lee was badly injured and several officers lost their lives. The criminal takes advantage of this and calls Wu. He tells him that because of him, all those people died. He felt very guilty, so he agrees to fight him. But he doesn't tell anyone else. He decides to keep everything a secret to avoid exposing them to more danger. For his part, Min Byung calls his uncle, who was the chief of the Korean intelligence department. He tells him everything that has happened and says he wants his help, but he doesn't want to lock up the criminal. He wants to get rid of him once and for all. Hurt anyone else. His uncle agrees and promises to send him his best agent. For his part, the superior tries to make the girl talk, but she was fierce, and none of them wanted to hit a girl. After a few hours, Detective Park arrives. He didn't want to hit her. He didn't even want to hurt her. He tells her she has two options: cooperate with them, or he'll tell her bosses that she betrayed them. And since they're very cautious, they'll simply eliminate a loose end. She knows he's right because no matter what she tells them, they won't believe her. So she tells them everything she knows. The one who hired her worked in the intelligence service. That's why he knew where and how to move. He acted as an intermediary between many people, and he charged a commission for that. He was also extremely careful. Detective Park asks her to send him a message. That way, they'll try to catch him. Then, they take her to the hotel to protect her. Later, Wu Jin talks to his friend. He tells him that he feels guilty and that he doesn't want anyone else to get hurt because of him. Wu Jin tells him not to say that everyone is helping him because it's the right thing to do, since they consider him a true friend, and they know he would do the same for them. Wu Wan tells him he's right. Deep down, he knew he would fight the villain to make him leave them alone. For his part, he had announced his fight. He put two very dirty boxers as his opponents. When his friends found out, one acts as if nothing is happening. As for Detective Lee, he had woken up even though he had a head injury. He left the hospital to help his friend. When he meets up with them, Wu Wan thanks him for his help. Then they plan their next move. First, they plan to target the former intelligence agent, but don't want Wu Wan to expose himself since their fight was announced online, and they're worried he could fall into a trap. Later, the former intelligence agent contacts the girl. She goes to the meeting place, but he was too clever and knows that something isn't right. That's why he simply gets rid of her. Later, Wu Wan's rivals arrive in the country. That's why he has to train harder than ever to be able to defeat them. On the day of the fight, he goes out as if nothing's wrong, and he arrives at the place without telling anyone. When he's face to face with the villain tells him that he could have saved a lot of time and money if he had agreed to fight earlier. In the end, it's all about money. But Wan doesn't think the same way, and he tells him that family is more important. The villain says that remains to be seen. Then they have to get ready. One of the criminals tells him that he should put on brass knuckles since his opponents are also wearing them. But Wu Wan says he won't do it. It's betraying his principles. At the same time, his friends discover that the broadcast of the fight had started. Everyone is surprised to see it, and they think that he had been tricked somehow in the first fight. He seemed to be having trouble, but he uses a new technique and knocks out his opponent with a single blow. That raises the stakes, and the criminals are pleased. Then he fights a boxer, who is known for being a cheater, although it takes him a bit of effort. But he already knows where they're broadcasting from, so they send their agents. But they were still very far away. Then it's time to fight the villain. He was tired. Still, he puts up a fight, but it's not enough to defeat him. The villain was ruthless, and his two-arm technique, it was flawless. He also always attacked the joints. That's how he manages to defeat our hero. But just when he was about to finish him off, the police arrive, and he has no choice but to run away days later. He wakes up, and he feels really bad for having lost. Wu Jin tells him not to do it again, that he should never fight alone anymore, because together they are stronger. Then we find out who the real villain is. Apparently he was a champion in Korea, very young, but when he was about to become a professional boxer, he lost and got so angry that he hit the referee and then his coach. Since then, he was expelled from professional boxing, and nothing was heard from him until now. All this time, he was fighting in the underground world, and he was the one who founded the IKFC. Now he wanted to sell it for $400 million. But the buyer wanted him to lose in his next fight, so that one would be the new face and the new star. The villain doesn't like this at all, and he says he won't sell to get more money. He wants to fight Wu Wan again. But this time, he'll charge extra for ending his life live. But he didn't take into account that the police already knew his identity. That's why they issued an arrest warrant against him. So he has to leave the country as soon as possible. But the villain wants to take Wan's mother so that he will follow him, and that way get his fight. The police were desperate, and that's why they decide to use the criminal's daughter as bait to capture him. When he arrives at the hospital, he tries to escape with his daughter, but he was already surrounded, so he has no choice but to surrender. Detective Lee tells him that if he helps them, he could get him a life sentence instead of the death penalty. That way, at least, he could watch his daughter grow up. And he accepts, with only one condition, that they take care of his daughter and his mother. Detective Lee gives him his word, and so he tells him everything he knows. He says that the intelligence agent is very skilled. Contacts. Also, they will leave in 4 days, and he plans to take Wan's mother to force him to fight. Then the villain calls him. He answers and acts as if nothing is happening. That's why now they will release the criminal to be an undercover agent. For his part, Wu Wan was recovering. Min Bai Hong was already fine, and now he wanted to help them. When he meets with Detective Lee, he makes his uncle's intelligence agent listen to everything.
Beon pregunta qué harán cuando
Detective Lee tells him that they will enforce the law, but Min Bai Hong tells him that's not enough. He wants them to eliminate the problem once and for all. Detective Lee tells him that's illegal, but Min Bai Hong replies that he has already made his decision. Meanwhile, Wu Jin. He managed to find the villain's former coach. Apparently, his father knew him and gave him his address so he could visit him. If anyone knew how to defeat him, it was his coach, since he knows the weaknesses of his technique. So they suggest going to train with him in order to defeat him. At the same time, Detective Lee was planning the right moment to capture the villain. For that, he calls the Violent Crimes Unit. They were from another city, so they could trust them because they hadn't been bought yet. That's how they come up with a plan. The crime boss would go to the veterinary clinic, so they could remove his stitches. The police would capture him there. When the time comes, they surround the whole place. Since the villain had gone alone, there were many police officers, but the villain was very strong. In the end, the police and their weapons overpower him, and that's how they manage to arrest him. When the hacker finds out, he asks the former intelligence agent to help him, but he tells him he won't do anything unless he pays him $500 million in Bitcoin. Once he transfers the money, he posts an announcement in a hound's chat. That's how many criminals start to move. All of them were S-class hounds, criminals without scruples. There was nothing they wouldn't do for money. The police are surrounded and outnumbered. They can't do anything against so many criminals. Their superior tries to help them, but even then, it wasn't enough. The S-class hounds? Dangerous. Even the most skilled police officers had trouble defeating them. That's why they released the criminal to help them. The superior also fights against them. When they finally manage to defeat them, it was already too late. The villain manages to break free and goes after the traitor. The superior tries to stop him, but ends up seriously injured. The traitor faces the boss. Even though he puts up a fight in the end, he's no match for him. That's why he ends up losing his life. At the same time, the criminals went after Gungho's mother. The security team tries to protect her. But these criminals, they were S-class hounds, and that's why they managed to defeat them without much trouble. In the end, Wu Jin has to go out to help them. Despite his mother's request, he defeats them with his bodyguard's help. But in the end, he faces Bayon, who had now become stronger because he had learned how to fight. Wu Jin can't beat him. His mother comes out to stop them from beating him. She tells the gorilla to release him and promises to go with the gorilla without resisting. Wu Jin is left crying, watching as they take his mother away. After all this, 2 people lost their lives. And Detective Lee was seriously injured. He had a head contusion. Then we see Wu Jin go straight to tell his friend that Baeon took his mother. He tells him he's very sorry. He says he should have died instead of her leaving. He tells him not to say that and that he should get better so he can save her. As for Detective Park, he wanted to protect the ex-cop's daughter, but his superior tells him no since he's a criminal. And besides, it's not his responsibility. That's why he asks Wu Jin for help. Wu Jin tells him they can stay at his house so they can protect them. Then they go to see the superior. He was already out of danger. Wu apologizes for causing so many problems. But his superior tells him not to apologize since it's his duty as a Marine and as his older brother. Then he gives him some advice. He tells him to harden his heart. That way his fists will become weapons, and he'll be able to protect his family. The next day, the boys return home, and later their mother and the ex-policeman's daughter arrive. In the afternoon, Min Baeon visits them, and he tells them that now they have to take responsibility since their cousin is still unconscious. That's why they want to lure the criminal into a trap. They'll give him the rematch he wants so badly with Gungho, but it will be in Korea so they can catch him. To make sure he takes the bait, they'll bet 100 billion won that way. He won't be able to refuse. Gungho agrees, and she's willing to do anything to save her mother. At night, a motorcyclist arrives. It turns out it was Mr. Wei. Apparently, he had survived from the first season villain's attack. And not just him. His wife and son were also alive. The kids cry when they see him, and they all hug each other like a family. Then the kids tell him everything that happened. Wu Jin tells him that he feels guilty for not protecting his mother. Mr. Wei tells him that he understands perfectly since he went through something similar. When he was caught, he betrayed his friends. And that's why he lost Mr. Choi and Mr. Won. He'll never forgive himself for that, but he tells them he still has a chance, since his mother is still alive and he can still do something to save her. Wu Jin calms down and promises to bring her back alive. Then Mr. Wei tells him there's a private group of S-Class trackers. They posted the offer to rescue the crime boss, and the group's administrator was the intelligence agent. Then they talked to Detective Park. He was a bit more flexible and was willing to bend the rules a little to catch those criminals. So he agrees to work with him. That's why he sends him alone, veterinarian, to make him talk using his own methods. When he arrives, he uses the old reliable method and tortures him with water and salt. The veterinarian has no other choice. More than that, he tells him everything he knows. That same night, the group of criminals tries to escape, but the airport was full of agents, so they can't leave the country. Then Min Byung and the guys want to organize the fight. Wu Jin says it would be better to have a 2-on-2 fight. That way, the gorilla would also be busy, and the others could rescue his mother. Everyone thinks it's a good idea. Then Min Byung. He manages to contact the criminals. He proposes the fight to the villain, but he gets very angry and tells him he'd better just deposit the money, or else he'll finish off Wu Min Byung's mother. But Min Byung doesn't let himself be intimidated and tells him to go ahead if he's so brave. That way, he can send his agents to take him down before he hurts the lady. One of his men tells him to accept the fight, that it's better not to mess with the intelligence service. Otherwise, they could end up getting caught. The villain has no choice but to accept. But he tells him that if anything goes wrong, he'll be the first to pay the consequences. Then he calls Min Byung. He tells him that they accept his deal, but they won't bet any money. Instead, they'll bet on the freedom of Wu Min Byung's mother. He accepts, and they agree that the fight will take place in 10 days. Until then, the lady will be safe. The boys promise to hurt each other, to win at any cost. That's why they go to another city in search of the villain's former coach. He recognizes them and tells them he was expecting them. That's how he begins to explain his technique to them. He teaches them how to defeat the villain and also a few new techniques. Meanwhile, Detective Park no longer knew who to trust, but his superior suggests gathering the Green Pine team. So they start assembling their team. Mr. Wei says he will infiltrate. That way, he can look for Wu Jin's mother. So when he manages to save her, the Green Pine team will be able to go in and capture the criminals. As for the villains, they were also training very hard. The gorilla wanted to take out the guys, so he kept getting stronger. Wu Jin knows that the villain is getting ready to defeat Wu Jin and his technique, so they plan to switch places. He is better at long distance and promises to give him a wound on his face to block his left side. Gungho tells him that it's very dangerous, but Wu Jin says they don't have another choice. His friend says he's right, but tells him that with the heart of a boxer, it's no longer enough to defeat these criminals. That's why he's even willing to use the iron knuckles he refused the first time. So the day of the fight approaches and everyone starts preparing. Mr. Wei successfully infiltrates as a hound, and now all that's left is to wait for the fight to begin. Then the guys and Min Bian arrive at the place. When they see the QR code with the bitcoins, the hacker scans it. But he didn't know that on the other side, the hacker had gotten into his phone. Now she had full access, and he didn't notice. Then the big fight begins, and Mr. Wei starts taking out the hounds. Then Wu Jin starts provoking the villain. He wanted to make him angry. That way he could injure his head. The villain falls for his trick, but he was very strong. Wu Jin could barely keep up with him, even with his new technique. He managed to wound his face. The blood starts to drip, and this causes them to switch places. Now it's Gun Wu's turn. He has to face the gorilla. He was much stronger now. For a moment, he seemed to be stronger than Gun Wu. But then he shows him the technique that he learned from the villain's former coach. And he manages to defeat him with a couple of moves. He also breaks his wrist so he can't keep fighting. Meanwhile, Mr. Wei, he faces all the S-Class hounds. Although he was injured, he manages to finish them all off. But the woman who was there was not Gunwoo's mother. She was a criminal who was acting as bait. Even so, Mr. Wei manages to take her down. Then he tells Detective Park that Gunwoo's mother must be in the other building. He tells him that he will go in alone to rescue her, and that way he'll arrest everyone at once. That's why Gunwoo has to buy more time. He follows Wei Jin's plan and opens the villain's wound to block his left side. That way he'll get an advantage. Even so, the villain was very strong. He knew exactly where to strike. He was a boxer skilled at fighting dirty. Gunwoo knows he can't win if he keeps fighting clean. That's why he decides to play along and fight just like him. So he targets his shoulder and destroys it. Now both of them only have one arm to fight with. Then they both throw the same punch at the same time. But this time, Gunwoo is stronger, and he crushes his wrist. Meanwhile, Detective Park rescues Gunwoo's mother. That's where he shows why he was the best in his class. Then the Green Pine team springs into action. These weren't regular officers, they were much more skilled at fighting. They managed to defeat all the criminals and arrest them. Then the boys finally reunite with their mother, and it seems like everything is over. But while they're transferring the villain, the intelligence team springs into action and takes the villain away in a matter of seconds. Later, they send a photo of him lifeless to Min Bian. They also send him all the money he had earned from his illegal fights. This makes the heir very happy, who thinks the problem is finally over. The boys, on their part, were very nervous because they thought the villain was still free and would come back at any moment for revenge. That's why they decide to move and become much stronger, so that no one else would get hurt because of them. What nobody knew was that the intelligence team didn't finish off the villain. Instead, they were going to use him for their own purposes. Now they'll put a leash on him and turn him into their own hound. He wasn't stupid, and he knew that those men wouldn't hesitate to finish him off, so he agrees to work for them. This could mean that we'll have a third season where our heroes go international and go to another country to take down another criminal organization. Or maybe it stays here and Netflix just cancels the series. Only time will tell what happens. Tell me what you think. Do you think there will be a third season? Personally, I hope so. The plot of this season was simpler, and they made it up since it's not in the webtoon. But the action scenes were really good, so I recommend watching the series. I hope you liked the summary. If you did, I invite you to give me a like and to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. See you in the next story.